Welcome to Registered, the podcast of the Catholic Register, where we'll be taking a look at the stories that graced all of our platforms over the past week. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register, alongside this week, Quinton Amundson. This week's episode is brought to you by Chalice. Give Christmas gifts that are Catholic, Canadian, and life-changing for a child living in poverty. The Chalice gift catalog is full of fun and meaningful options, and every dollar goes to the children, guaranteed. Find your perfect gifts at chalice.ca. Well, thank you and welcome to you, Quinton. We're going to have to go right into something that we have spoken about, I don't know how many times now in the past few podcasts, but I don't see it slowing down any for us. We'll be talking about this for time immemorial, it seems, right now. And that, of course, is the food security issue. And I know you did a story this week about the Canadian bishops, and they've put out a pastoral letter on food insecurity. Most astonishing, of course, as people who've been following us in the Register have seen, are some of the statistics about food insecurity in Canada. Maybe you could share some of those with us, Quinton.
Mickey, we have to just consider the fact that the Daily Bread Food Bank in Toronto, it took them 38 years to get to 1 million visits in a single year. And just within 5 years afterwards, now they're up to 4 million annual viewers. So, I mean, that is just staggering. And Food Banks Canada, every year they do a snapshot in March called Hunger Count, and they found that there were over 2 million visits to food banks across the country in March alone, the highest ever amount in history, over 6% than last year. So, I mean, that's why I was maybe a little bit direct to the punch in my lead. It's just so undeniable. This is a very serious problem. It's not going anywhere, and it's going to require a lot of different people formulating solutions. And appropriately, on the World Day of the Poor, the bishops have stepped up to the plate here with some suggestions.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the suggestions they came out with?
Well, the themes that they really centered the whole document around were solidarity, harmony, and harvest. So naturally, when it came to solidarity, it's a little bit about perhaps, being in really good allyship with the people that do not have food by maybe being a little bit better with fasting, to really show that we understand a little bit more of the plight. And considering that every time we have food as a gift, perhaps we don't waste the gifts that we receive when we go to the grocery store. I mean, we have to maybe be a little bit more discerning. We were talking about this, recently. We've talked about this food issue many times. Maybe the trip to the grocery store has to be a little bit more conscientious than we would in the past, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, I look at the situation in Toronto. Toronto used to be, I would say, probably the cheapest place where you could buy groceries in North America. I know this from my wife and I lived out in Regina for a little while, and the prices were ridiculous out there. My wife was in Boston. The prices were absolutely ridiculous, and we go down to Florida quite often, and the prices are ridiculous. You came home and it's like, whew, I'm saving some money. Well, now you look at it, and our food, and this is all post-COVID, which, this is no shock to anyone, has just crept up and crept up and crept up. And now it's at the point where the prices in Toronto are ridiculous. And then you go outside of Toronto. If you go up to just a little cottage country town like, say, Bob Cajun, which has always been more expensive than Toronto, and it's now even more ridiculously expensive than we are here. So that makes us having to. It's forced us to be more discerning when we go to the grocery store. You look at this stuff and you go, do I need that? No, I don't think I do, because quite often you find you've been throwing stuff out, and we're doing that. We're finding at home now, we're not throwing stuff out. We are making it last right to the end. How are things looking out in Calgary? that way.
Very much the same. I mean, when you used to kind of go to like a Safeway with a couple of those reusable bags, I mean, you'd be able to cover, really fill two of those bags, and I don't know, maybe the groceries would come out around $75, but you just fill two bags nowadays, and you're around $150, and it's just you don't really go as far. And I mean, certainly you have to, be very good about not throwing things out. And perhaps one of the ways in the letter that they're talking about reclaiming the value of food is growing more of your own food. One of the things that the bishops found very promising is there are more people that are getting involved in gardening. And, my parents have, done that in the last few years and have grown some wonderful potatoes and tomatoes. And they're seeing that not only in larger communities, but in the rural areas, of course, is so huge. So, I mean, it helps to, grow your own food, but the bishops also say, let's be very gracious about the people that are growing the food. During my conversation with the Archbishop of Montreal, Christian Lepine, and he oversees this Episcopal commission that wrote this letter. And he said, well, remember, at one point, a couple centuries ago, 80% of the people lived in the rural areas, and they would be able to supply the food. Now there's only about 20%, and if 20% of the people are really feeding the whole world. So I mean that really stayed with me. And yes, we need to value the people that are growing our food nowadays. What do you think about that?
Well, they are, and there's been a big change in that because it used to be the family farm that would do things for you, and now, I guess they brought in, so it's so much more commercialized. We've got these big farm factory sort of operations doing things, but that's also changed things. What now you're looking at, okay, well, they want to they're looking at the bottom line. They want a buck. So this is the one thing that always amazed me. Again, when we were in Regina, when you fly in around harvest season, you've got the prairies are all around surrounding, and then boom, there's this city, Regina. And it's not a huge city, but it's a good size,
Yeah.
and it's just enveloped by yellow because they're selling canola or they're growing canola. Well, back in the day, they wouldn't be selling canola for export to China and wherever for oils. That would probably be wheat, uh, just all, stuff that we need to eat here at home. And that would be nice to see a little bit more of that. Like maybe we do that, especially we've got China has with in the whole tariff situation. They have tariffed the canola. Well, maybe we turn some of those into let's grow fields of tomatoes, potatoes, peppers. I don't know what grows well out on the prairie, but I'm sure those do. So we've got to start looking out for ourselves, I guess, is the thing that I'd like to see.
I know that one of the big calls to action that the letter has is we have to just be very efficient and very meaningful and having these systems of distribution that could feed as many people as possible. Because, of course, one of the great pieces of wisdom in the Bible is that God gave us all these abundant gifts with the food, and we have to make sure it feeds as many mouths as possible. So, I mean, it all comes back to the idea of harvest and harmony and, of course, solidarity. And I think perhaps one of the things in our cover story this week, which I think you're going to be telling us a little bit about, Mickey, is an effort of a particular, parish to show solidarity with migrant workers.
Yes, and this is a story. I'd love it if Luke was here to tell us more about it. But Luke, of course, after holding the fort for you and I while we were out looking at all the churches in Europe last week, he's taken a few days off. But he did this really nice story out of Bradford, Ontario's Holy Martyrs of Japan Parish, where if anyone, most people in Toronto would know, it's around the Holland Marsh, which is an area north of Toronto, and anyone who's driven up Highway 400, uh, you can't miss it. It's you just get a little north of where Newmarket would be, and there's these this huge fields, farm fields, and something like 7,500 acres, if I'm not mistaken. Luke said was there, but the people who are growing the food there or are harvesting it and working the fields are migrant workers. So our Holy Martyrs of Japan, under Father John Pack and Father Edwin Legrano, they've started up a Saint Philip of Jesus or Saint Felipe de Jesús mission out of the parish. And what that does is it ministers to these migrant workers who are in the fields. Now we all know about the migrant workers. It's they're in the news constantly and have been for many years. The one thing that is just not brought up all that often about us all is they're doing the work that we can't find Canadian people to do. So thank God that they are there. They come in, they do their 6, 9 months, and then they go back home. So, um, but that creates, you've got a situation where they're away from home. They're probably a little bit lonely. They're missing their families. So it's an absolute wonderful story that they've got this mission that is there and is creating community for them. They have they run dinners. Of course they're Mexicans. They're soccer crazy. So there's soccer viewing nights. And they're just running all kinds of things, and they're also bringing the local community in to help out with the people and meet with these people. So it's really nice. They're building community for these people.
It's really, really wonderful to see the bridge building here. And I mean, this is what Christian ministries could do so well. And I mean, that's what I was very struck by, recognizing that it's never, easy to leave your home, the sense of familiarity where you draw a lot of strength and comfort from to come to a different land. And it's sometimes very difficult in adjusting with the language and customs, but it's always good to get that practical support. But I think it is that spiritual dimension that really stands out in Luke's really good story here. That they're really, recognizing that, these people need to be affirmed and they need to be, strengthened to go out there to do the work that they do, and, very essential work that we need. And there needs to be a very good well-being to make sure that these workers are being treated properly. Because as we know, if people don't feel affirmed, there could be very difficult things with the systems. There's always risks in terms of exploitation that happens. But the good news is that when you have a strong community of churchgoers, you just have those extra pair of eyes and advocates and possible friendships that could be struck. It's quite amazing when you do see this is what the Catholic Church does so well. I'd say almost better than any entity in the world. I mean, you want to talk about the intrinsic value that the Catholic Church brings to Canada. Well, this should be a shining example of that.
Okay. Well, if we're going to be talking about migrants and ministry, we've got quite an interesting story. This is one of your stories this week. We've got two new bishops who were appointed this week. Bishop Stephen Hero from Prince Albert will be moving over to take over as Archbishop of Edmonton. And I know that is something you are working on getting an interview with the Archbishop-Elect. But probably the more interesting story is we've got going up to Keewatin-Le Pas in the northern reaches of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario is Father Susai Jesu, an Indian oblate who obviously not born and raised here, but has been ministering here for a number of years now. How about you give us a little bit about his story?
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. He came here at the invitation of the Oblates 18 years ago, and it was Father Sylvain Lavoie, who was the former Archbishop of Keewatin-Le Pas, and he, of course, moved on to be the director of the Star of the North retreats. So very, influential guy, and Father Ken Forson brought him in, and since he came, he ministered at a couple of the parishes for 8 years at the archdiocese that he is now serving. And then he moved over to Alberta. And for many years, 8 in fact, he was the pastor of Sacred Heart Parish of the First Peoples, the first and only designated Indigenous church in all of Canada. And in 2022, his path collided with Pope Francis because that parish was one of the very first stops on the penitential pilgrimage that Pope Francis took here in order to foster better ties with the indigenous peoples. So that was quite an honor. And I know that he conducted himself very well, made a name for himself there. And I think the way that he really ministered in that particular time has really got the attention of the Vatican. So it was, of course, the Cardinal, the Pope Leo now that, urged the, Apostolic Nuncio to pass along the information and the announcement that he's going to be going back to Keewatin-Le Pas, and this is an area that he knows very well. Like I said, 8 years. So imagine so different for a new archbishop to come to an area that you know. He doesn't have to do this whole 1 year of, well, let's just sit back and see what I need to learn here. He's going to go in there and he knows what he wants to do. He's going to meet with these First Nation chiefs and counselors to talk about how could we build something together. And he's also working on his coat of arms, and he knows exactly what he wants to infuse in there to really appeal to the indigenous people that he's going to be serving. 90% of his parishioners are going to be indigenous, so that's going to be a big focus. I mean, what kind of stands out to you about this guy's story?
Well, this is the missions. Those who were missioned are now becoming the missionaries. It's the church went to India and did all the missioning over all these many years, and we've seen this for so much in the last 20 years that so many priests are coming out of India, out of Sri Lanka, out of Nigeria, and coming and serving here in Canada. And so many of them, like Father Jesu, well, they're not coming to Toronto where there's a big diaspora of Indian diaspora. Oh no, they're going up, first place he went, Keewatin-Le Pas. So that's it's wonderful that he's done that. He's built a relationship, and obviously the relationship is very strong, or else the Vatican would have sent him up there to be the archbishop. So that is what I find incredible, and I love to see.
And I will want to mention that he also has a very sterling track record with community programming. Like this is the guy that will go out and, really lead programs, for community meals and, hot lunch programs and very active in visiting, people that are vulnerable in the streets. And they deserve a lot of recognition for being very welcoming to evacuees of the wildfires from the Northwest Territories, especially a couple of years ago, where there were some people that were out of their homes for over a month. So they did various cultural programs there. I did a story on that. So, I mean, this guy knows how to be that welcoming hand to the people that he's serving.
Is a great example of the church doing what the church does. So, well, I think that's going to bring us to an end of this week's. But I will give you a little teaser about some of the stuff we're working on. And of course, these are a couple of the things that Quinton is working on himself. we're expecting at any point today some update on the Ukraine peace deal, which hopefully will bring an end to the fighting in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine. And also the Nigerian situation, where we've had, again, unfortunately, about some 300 students kidnapped by, we don't know for sure it's Boko Haram, but it probably is. It's some kind of group like that. So Quinton will hopefully be digging into that and getting some stories for next week for us. So we'd like to thank you for joining us for this week, and thanks to Quinton. And we hope you can join us next time for Registered. Meanwhile, for all your Catholic news, be sure to stay informed at catholicregister.org. And a special shout out to Chalice, our sponsor this week. Give Christmas gifts that are Catholic, Canadian, and life-changing for a child living in poverty. The Chalice gift catalog is full of fun and meaningful options, and every dollar goes to the children, guaranteed. Find your perfect gifts at chalice.ca.